Who's Alex? The words slipped out, sharp and unplanned, cutting through the soft hum of the TV. Mark's eyes flickered, fingers freezing around the remote, a breath catching sharp and shallow in his chest. His knuckles turned white, and for a moment, just a fraction of a second, something dark and guilty flashed behind his eyes, too quick to hide, too raw to ignore. Sarah's breath was shallow, heart pounding painfully, fingers flexing tight around the phone she hadn't meant to pick up, the one Mark had left on the kitchen counter, screen still glowing softly, a message open and stark. "Miss you! When can I see you again?" Alex. Her pulse roared in her ears, throat tight with something bitter and raw, eyes burning as she stared at the words, at the smiley face tacked onto the end, at the timestamp barely an hour old. "Sarah, Mark's voice cracked low and hoarse, but she couldn't hear it over the static in her skull, over the way her breath shuddered painfully, uneven and sharp. Because there was only one thing worse than knowing he was cheating, and that was realizing that Alex was a man. The silence was suffocating. Sarah's breath shuddered out, shallow and uneven, eyes dark and unblinking as she stared at Mark, at the way his fingers clenched around the remote, knuckles white and trembling, eyes wide and frantic and too bright under the living room lights. The TV droned on, laugh tracks and canned dialogue echoing hollowly, but all she could hear was the rush of blood in her ears, the rapid thud of her heart slamming painfully against her ribs. Mark's mouth opened, closed, breath catching painfully. His eyes flickered to the phone still clutched tight in her hand. The message opened, the name stark and damning on the screen. Alex. "Sarah, It's not what you think," he rasped, voice cracking. "Please, just let me explain." But the words tasted bitter, and Sarah's lips pressed into a thin line, fingers flexing tight until the edges of the phone bit sharply into her palms. "Not what I think?" she repeated, voice low and raw, a laugh that was more broken than anything slipping past her lips. "You're kidding me, right? Miss you? When can I see you again? What part of that am I misunderstanding, Mark?" He flinched, eyes squeezing shut, jaw clenched so tight a muscle jumped in his cheek. His breath was ragged, chest heaving, fingers twisting nervously in the hem of his shirt. Telltale signs she'd learned to read over 8 years of marriage. Nervous. Caught. Guilty. "Please," Mark tried again, voice hoarse, eyes pleading. It's not like that. I swear, Oh my God," Sarah choked, a laugh tearing past her lips, bitter and breathless and dangerously close to a sob. "Just stop. Mark, I can't do this right now." She turned sharply, steps unsteady, vision blurring with the hot sting of tears she refused to let fall. The hallway stretched long and dark, shadows pooling in the corners, and her breath came quick and shallow, fingers numb around the phone as she stumbled into the bedroom, door slamming with a hollow crack that left the walls shuddering. Her back hit the door, knees buckling, breath punching out in harsh, uneven gasps. The message was still open, the words blurring and doubling, and she squeezed her eyes shut, throats tight and raw. Because this wasn't just about the betrayal. It was about who he'd betrayed her with, about every smile, every touch, every late night he'd spent hunched over his phone, lips curled into a soft smile Sarah hadn't seen in years. The light under the door flickered. Footsteps. Slow and hesitant and painfully familiar. Mark's voice was muffled, hoarse, and desperate. "Sarah, please, just talk to me. I never wanted you to find out like this. How long?" Sarah rasped, voice cracking. Her fingers clenched tighter, nails biting into her palms, jaw aching with the effort of keeping the tears at bay. "How long has it been going on, Mark?" Silence, thick and suffocating, pressing down with a weight that left her breathless. "A year," he whispered finally, voice so low she almost didn't hear it. It's been a year." Her breath punched out, a soft broken sound that shattered the quiet. A year, 12 months, 52 weeks of stolen glances and hidden messages and the warm, breathless laughs she had once thought were hers alone. "Are you in love with him?" she choked, voice raw and bitter and trembling. Another silence, longer, heavier, more damning. "I don't know." Mark rasped finally, voice cracking, eyes squeezed shut. I think I might be." The words left her hollow, breath shuddering painfully, eyes burning with the tears she couldn't stop this time. Because it wasn't just about the betrayal. It was about the love that was supposed to be hers, about the way his voice cracked when he said Alex's name, about the guilt and longing that twisted his face in a way she hadn't seen in years. She sank down, knees hitting the hardwood with a dull thud, breath breaking in uneven gasps. The phone slipped from her fingers, clattering to the floor, and her hands trembled, nails digging into her arms, eyes squeezed shut against the raw, relentless ache in her chest. Mark's voice was soft, hoarse with guilt. "I never wanted to hurt you," he choked, voice cracking. "I tried. I really tried, Sarah, but I couldn't. I couldn't keep pretending." Her breath punched out, fingers clenching tight, eyes dark and unblinking. "So what?" she rasped, voice low and venomous. "You just let me keep playing the part of your perfect wife? Let me keep pretending while you snuck around behind my back?" "No, God, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." But the apologies tasted bitter, like ash and betrayal and the dull, relentless ache of a wound too deep to heal. Because it wasn't about the affair. It was about the years she'd spent thinking she was enough. About the way he'd smiled, the way he'd held her, the way he'd whispered "I love you" with a conviction that had seemed unshakable. The clock ticked softly, seconds dragging out painfully slow, and her breath came shallow and uneven, eyes fixed blankly on the dark window, on the streetlights that glowed dimly through the curtains, blurred and wavering. Maybe the worst part it wasn't the betrayal. It was the love that still lingered, raw and aching and unrelenting even now. The way her chest twisted painfully at the sight of him crumbling, fingers trembling, eyes dark with guilt and regret, and something else she didn't dare put a name to. Her breath shuddered out, fingers flexing weakly, jaw clenched tight enough to ache. "I can't do this right now," she whispered, voice barely more than a breath. I need time." Mark's breath caught, eyes wide and glassy, but he nodded, a quick, desperate motion that left him swaying. "Okay," he choked. "Take all the time you need. I'll be here, I promise." But as she turned away, steps unsteady, fingers trembling around the doorknob, she couldn't help but wonder if that was just another lie, another empty promise in a marriage that had been built on nothing but deception, and a love that was never truly hers to keep. The silence was suffocating. Rain drummed relentlessly on the motel roof, a dull roar that couldn't drown out the words that kept echoing in Sarah's mind. "I think I might be in love with him." Her breath was shallow and uneven, fingers trembling around the doorframe, eyes fixed on Mark, standing soaked and shivering in the hallway. His eyes were rimmed red, rain streaking dark through his hair, lips parted with a plea that cracked in his throat. "Sarah, please," he rasped, voice hoarse and desperate. "I know I messed up. I know I ruined everything, but I can't lose you. Not like this." Her chest ached, raw and splintered, breath shuddering painfully. The words tasted bitter, like betrayal and salt, each one cutting deeper than the last. "You already did," she spat, voice cracking with something dangerously close to a sob. "A year, Mark. A whole year of lies and sneaking around behind my back, and now you want to act like you care?" Mark's breath hitched, eyes squeezing shut, fingers twitching uselessly at his sides. His shoulders hunched against the cold, against the guilt that twisted every line of his face. "I do care," he choked, voice cracking. "I never stopped caring, never stopped loving you. I was scared, Sarah. I didn't know how to—" "Scared?" she snapped, laugh tearing free that tasted like ashes. "You let me lie in our bed. Let me wear that stupid necklace you got me for our anniversary. Let me believe every 'I love you' was real. How could you do that to me?" His eyes glistened, tears slipping silent and unrelenting down his cheeks. His hands twitched, half raised, a useless apology in the way his breath broke, in the way his voice cracked on her name. "I didn't want to hurt you," he rasped. "I was going to tell you. I swear, I couldn't. I couldn't keep pretending." Her fingers flexed tight around the doorframe, nails biting deep, breath shuddering. "So what?" she bit out, voice raw and trembling. "You just let me keep playing the part of your perfect little wife while you snuck around with him?" Her voice broke, a sob tearing free, hands flying to cover her mouth. Mark's breath was shallow and uneven, eyes dark and glassy, voice a rasp, barely more than a breath. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I know it's not enough. I know I can't fix this, but please, please don't leave me, Sarah." "You don't get to ask me that!" she spat, voice cracking, eyes burning. "Not after God, not after this." His face crumpled, breath shuddering out, and for a moment she thought he might drop to his knees, might beg in earnest. But he just stood there, rain-soaked and broken, hands hanging limp at his sides. "Please," he choked, voice breaking. "I'll end it. I'll do anything. Just don't go. I love you, Sarah. I love you so much. Her breath hitched, eyes dark and unblinking, fingers clenching so tight her knuckles ached. Because the worst part, it wasn't the betrayal. It was the love that still clung heavy and raw, refusing to fade. The way her chest twisted painfully at the sight of him crumbling, fingers trembling, eyes dark with guilt and regret. I can't, she rasped finally, voice cracking. I can't even look at you right now. The door swung shut with a soft click, cutting off his voice, his eyes, his hands that had hovered inches from her own. And as the latch slid into place, her breath broke raw and ragged, tears slipping silent and unrelenting down her cheeks. Because maybe the worst part, it wasn't the lies. It was the way she still wanted to believe them. The way she still loved him, even now, raw and aching and unrelenting. And maybe that was the real betrayal. Not just the lies, but the way she still wanted to forgive. The door clicked shut with a soft finality that left the room hollow and cold. Sarah's breath shuddered out, fingers flexing weakly around the edges of the bedspread, eyes dark and unblinking as she stared at the rain-streaked window, headlights slashing through the darkness outside, shadows pooling thick and suffocating in the corners. Her chest ached, raw and relentless, each breath scraping painfully against her ribs, the weight of it settling deep and unrelenting. Mark's voice still echoed in her mind, hoarse and cracking. Please, don't go. I love you. The words tasted bitter, like betrayal and salt, each one cutting deeper than the last. Because it wasn't just about the affair. It was about the love that had been real, and the lies that had buried it, about the years she'd spent believing in something that had never truly been hers to keep. Her phone buzzed weakly on the bed, screen glowing faintly. 15 missed calls, a dozen texts, Mark's name stark and unrelenting at the top of each one. Apologies blurred and doubled, words that cracked and splintered under the weight of the truth that lay heavy and suffocating between them. She didn't answer. Couldn't. Instead, her fingers flexed weakly around the blanket, nails biting into the thin fabric, eyes burning with a raw, unrelenting sting that refused to fade. The TV buzzed softly, news anchors droning in the background, talk of storms and road closures, a world that felt painfully far away. The motel room was small and dim, wallpaper peeling at the corners, air stale and heavy with the scent of bleach. It wasn't home, but neither was the house she'd left behind. The bed with the cold sheets, the kitchen with the half-empty wine glasses, the wedding photo that smiled down with a lie, bright and unshakable in every pixel. Her breath punched out, her chest aching, eyes squeezing shut, because going back felt impossible, but leaving meant tearing out roots that had buried deep, meant packing up 8 years into suitcases and cardboard boxes, meant divorce papers and lawyers and faces that watched with pity and whispers that cut deeper than any blade. Mark's voice cracked through the phone, another voicemail, soft and hoarse, words breaking on every breath. Sarah, please. I know I don't deserve it, but just talk to me. I need to hear your voice. I just need to know you're okay. Her fingers trembled, eyes dark and unblinking, breath shuddering painfully. Because the worst part wasn't the betrayal. It was the way she still wanted to call back, to forgive, to pretend that maybe, somehow, it could all go back to the way it was. But the words stayed stuck in her throat, bitter and sharp and unrelenting. Because the truth was that nothing could go back, not after the lies, not after Alex, not after the realization that she'd never truly been the one he wanted. The hotel mirror was cracked, edges splintered and sharp, her reflection ghostly and hollow-eyed in the dim light. Mascara streaked dark down her cheeks, lips cracked and pale, hair limp and tangled around her shoulders. A stranger's face stared back, someone hollow and brittle, someone who looked like they might shatter at the slightest touch. Her breath was shallow, fingers flexing tight around the sink, eyes dark and unblinking. Because the truth wasn't freedom, it was a prison. One where every step forward felt like a fresh wound, where every breath tasted like salt and betrayal, where every thought came back to the same raw, aching question. Was any of it real? 3 days passed, each one slower than the last, each night dragging out in hollow silence and flickering TV screens and takeout boxes stacked on the motel dresser. Mark's calls had slowed but never stopped. Voicemails that cracked and splintered, apologies that blurred together into static and salt. The 4th day brought a knock at the door, soft, hesitant, almost afraid. Her breath caught, heart pounding painfully, fingers flexing tight around the doorknob. For a moment she didn't move. Couldn't. the silence thick and suffocating, the weight of it settling deep and unrelenting. Then the knock came again. 3 soft taps, deliberate and slow. Her breath punched out, eyes narrowing, fingers trembling as she twisted the lock, door swinging open with a soft click. But it wasn't Mark. It was her sister. Eyes dark and unblinking, lips pressed tight, fingers flexing around a set of car keys with something raw and unspoken in every line of her face. "You're coming home!" her sister bit out, voice low and unrelenting. "Pack your stuff. I'm not leaving without you." Her breath shuddered, eyes dark and glassy, fingers flexing weakly around the doorframe. Because the truth was that she didn't know where home was anymore. If it was the house with the cold sheets and the wedding photo, or the motel with the flickering TV and the bed that smelled of bleach. But her sister's hand was warm, fingers firm and unrelenting around her own, eyes dark with something that looked dangerously close to a lifeline. And for the first time in days, her breath came a little easier, the weight in her chest lightening just enough to let her ribs expand without breaking. Maybe the worst part it wasn't leaving. Maybe it was realizing that she already had. Sarah sat by the window, the cool glass pressed against her forehead, eyes fixed on the rain-soaked street below. Her sister's apartment was small but warm, the air filled with the soft hum of music and the faint smell of fresh coffee. The world outside moved on, cars splashing through puddles, people huddled under umbrellas, life continuing despite the storm. Her phone lay silent on the table, screen dark and unblinking. Mark's name no longer lighting up with missed calls and messages that had blurred into white noise. She'd blocked him a week ago, after the 3rd time he'd shown up at the motel, voice cracking with apologies that cut more than they healed. It hadn't been easy. Her hands had shaken, breath coming in sharp, uneven gasps, tears slipping silent and unrelenting down her cheeks. Because it wasn't just about letting go of him. It was about letting go of the life they'd built, of the love she'd thought was real, of the future she'd imagined with every anniversary, every shared smile, every quiet morning wrapped in the comfort of familiarity. But healing wasn't linear. Some days, she woke up feeling light, like the weight had finally lifted, like the world was full of color again. Other days, the grief hit like a wave, raw and unrelenting, leaving her breathless and curled up under blankets that couldn't quite chase away the cold. Her sister's voice cut through the quiet, soft and gentle. "I made tea. Do you want some?" Sarah looked up, eyes dark and glassy, lips curling into a small, tentative smile. "Yeah," she whispered, voice still hoarse but steady. "Yeah, I'd like that." The truth had a price. It always did. It shattered the fragile glass of her marriage, leaving shards that cut deep, that left scars that might never fully fade. But it also set her free, from the lies, from the shadows, from the weight of pretending everything was okay when nothing was. And maybe that was the real lesson, the one that burned sharp and unrelenting but left something clean and raw in its wake. That sometimes walking away wasn't just an escape, it was a beginning. A chance to find herself again, to rebuild, to breathe without the tightness in her chest, to love without wondering if it was real. Her breath shuddered out, fingers flexing around the warm cup of tea, the steam curling up in soft, delicate tendrils. Because leaving Mark had felt like an ending, like tearing out a part of herself, like stepping into the unknown with nothing but a suitcase and a heart full of cracks. But sitting here in the soft glow of her sister's kitchen, with a cup of tea and the rain tapping gently against the window, it felt like maybe, just maybe, it was the first step toward home. Sometimes the hardest thing to do is to walk away from the love you thought you needed to find the peace you truly deserve. And as the rain began to ease, and the world outside softened into shades of gray and green, Sarah let herself hope, just a little, that there was light on the other side of the storm.